Hey everybody, it's December 24. There's snowstorms going on everywhere. I'm in the car and I haven't gotten to read a story yet, so you get to hear a story from our car. And the last story we are going to read is from Uncle Arthur's Bedtime Stories, and it is called Unlucky Jim. Jim thought he was the most unlucky boy who had ever been born. Everything seemed to go wrong with him. Life looked particularly dark for him just now. For only a few minutes ago, his one and only glass marble had rolled down a drain. But quite apart from this, he had much to make him feel blue. For one thing, he was shivering with cold. He should have had warm stockings and underclothes to wear, but he hadn't any because there was not enough money to buy them. Father was out of work. For another thing, he was hungry. It was some hours since lunch, and the bread and butter he'd had then seemed to have gone clear down to the South Pole. As he trudged along the streets with his hands in his pockets, he saw lots of other boys and girls going into beautiful homes for their supper, and he knew that he would have to climb up the dirty, narrow stairs for a dingy, crowded apartment for the little bit of bread and jam that he would get. Just then he passed a toy shop all ablaze with lights and full of everything that might make a boy's heart glad. He stopped a moment and watched other boys and girls coming out with their brown paper packages under their arms. He jabbed his hands a little deeper down into his pocket and fingered his nickel once again, his very last coin. How he wished that he could buy something to take to his little sister, lying at home so sick, something she would really like. If I ain't the unluckiest fellow that ever lived, he said to himself. And this is the picture that goes along with it. I don't know if you could see it. Oh, there we go. Back further. Looking into the windows. But the next day, his luck changed. He was walking down the street when a well-dressed woman stopped and spoke to him. "Is your name Jimmy McKay?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," said Jimmy, surprised and wondering what was going to happen. "Well," said the woman, "we have your name on a list at our church, and we want you to come to a special Christmas party next week. Here is a ticket for you." "Oh my," said Jimmy, not knowing what else to say. "But what about Jean? She's my sister. You know, well, she'll be better by then, perhaps. She ought to come too." "I'm afraid we can only take one from each family this time," said the woman kindly. "We will try to take Jean next time." "Well, that's lucky and unlucky," said Jim to himself as the woman walked away. "Lucky for me and unlucky for poor Jean." Then a bright idea occurred to him. Perhaps he could let Jean go instead of him. He looked at his card. It read, "Admit bearer, Jimmy McKay, only." "Unlucky again," murmured Jimmy. So Jimmy went to the party. For the greater part of the time, he forgot all about his troubles. Everything was so different, so very wonderful. He had never had so much to eat. After the meal, they all played games until it was time for the presents on the Christmas tree to be given away. What excitement there was then, especially as each child was to be allowed to choose just what he wanted most. Jim could hardly sit still as he watched the other children going up in front of him. He felt as if he were on pins and needles. He had seen such a wonderful toy fire engine hanging on the tree, something he had wanted all his life, and how he did hope and hope and hope that no one else would ask for it first. At last, after what seemed hours, Jimmy's turn came to make his choice. "Jimmy McKay!" called out the woman by the tree. Jimmy jumped from his seat like a shell from a cannon. All he could see was that red fire truck. It was still there. As he approached the woman, he noticed that she was the very one who had spoken to him in the street and given him his ticket for the party. Immediately, a new idea entered his mind. "And what would you like to have, Jimmy?" asked the woman. "You may have only one thing that you would like from the tree." What an offer! Jimmy could scarcely take it in. He stood and gazed up at the sparkling, heavily laden tree. Once more his eye caught sight of the fire truck. And here's the picture that goes along with that. Oh, yeah, back here. Most of all, he said, looking up at the lady, I would like the red fire truck. But if you don't mind, I will take that doll over there. Tears filled his eyes as he said it, but with great resolution he kept his face straight. Somehow the woman seemed to understand, and without a word she brought Jimmy the doll. As he went away, she squeezed his hand and, bending down, whispered, God bless you, Jimmy. But the other children did not understand at all. There were giggles and snickers, then whoops and yells as they told the world that Jimmy had chosen a doll. Some of the boys called out, Sissy! And others with a laugh, Imagine a boy taking a doll! And the little girl said, That was just the doll we wanted. Jimmy blushed. He couldn't help it. Finally, he became so uncomfortable that he put on his cap and went out with the doll under his arm. All the way home, he thought about the bad luck that seemed to have dogged his footsteps. First, he had lost his fire truck, and second, he had been laughed at by the whole crowd of children. If I'm not the unluckiest fellow, he began. Then he felt the doll under his arm. At once his thoughts brightened and his step quickened. A few minutes later, he was up in the little dark bedroom where Jean lay sick in bed. I'm so glad you've come, said Jean. It's so lonely here all by myself. And what have you got there? She asked, sitting up in bed and peering at the doll with eager eyes. Is that for me? Oh, Jimmy, you are a dear. Jimmy forgot all about his bad luck. A thrill of joy went through him as he saw his sister's delight. Just then there was a knock at the door. It was the woman from the church. What? Began Jimmy. I've come over to say how sorry I am that the children were so unkind to you this evening, interrupted the woman. They are sorry too now. I told them why you chose the doll, and they asked me to bring you something for yourself. Here it is. Now I must go, for it is getting late. Good night. And she was gone. Jimmy gasped and then opened the package. It was the fire engine. Then he danced a jig around Jean's bed, chuckling to himself and saying, If I'm not the luckiest fellow alive. Oh, what a fabulous story. I tell you, joy really does fill my heart too when we see the delight of others. Kindness always comes back, and we are always happier when we think of others and when we give. I hope you have the most wonderful Christmas ever, and, well, I hope you have a happy new year as well.